Simon had been dating Melanie for a year, but he still couldn't decide to introduce her to his parents. They met by chance in the park. Simon was waiting for his friend and saw a charming stranger on a nearby bench. It was Melanie. Simon was delighted but was too shy to approach. Later, the girl was joined by another girl, and meantime, Simon finally waited for his friend. He was very surprised and happy when it turned out that both girls had been invited by his friend on a double date. Melanie turned out to be a nice and modest girl, and Simon was delighted by her peculiarity to blush with embarrassment when he complimented her. She was so much different from the boring spoiled girls, daughters of large businessmen, with whom he used to communicate, that the guy immediately fell in love with this mysterious and beautiful girl. Simon knew from the scanty phrases that Melanie was from a simple family and was brought up by her mother. He did not care much, but he feared the disapproval of his parents. His father held a senior position in a factory. After learning from their son that he had a girlfriend, his parents insisted on meeting the one they thought was trying to marry their only son. And now the day had come that Simon had been waiting for and dreading. He was anxious about the introduction, and Melanie was also nervous and kept rubbing her bracelet on her wrist. When they arrived at the threshold of the house, Simon's father came out to meet them. He gave her a disapproving look and, without a word, went into his study. Melanie felt uncomfortable, but she managed to pull herself together and went into the house. They were met by Simon's mother in the dining room, and she also behaved very reservedly, but still said hello and offered to sit down. But as soon as Simon left the room, she did not hesitate and told Melanie that she would not allow her to trick her son and make a good living at his expense. Melanie was stunned and did not know how to react to such blatant rudeness. Then Simon came into the room, happily kissed his mother on the cheek, and sat down at the table to uncork the champagne. There was no face on Melanie. She tried to calm down, but she could feel Simon's mother keeping an eye on her. The girl was uncomfortable under the clinging gaze of the woman, squeamishly examining her simple hair and modest outfit. The woman showed her superiority with all her appearance and made Melanie feel uncomfortable. Simon attempted to lighten the tension with jokes, but he failed. Finally, Simon's father showed up at the door. The man sat down at the table and, without waiting for others, began to eat. When he was finished with the steak, he wiped his mouth with a napkin, stopped his gaze on Melanie, and asked her who were her parents. "I was brought up by my mother, and she worked all her life as a kindergarten teacher, and I rarely saw my father because he..." Melanie had no time to finish before she was interrupted. "Too bad. The family must be complete. Otherwise, it's not a family, and the children do not get a proper upbringing," Simon's father admonished. Melanie tried to object and explain, but then the man continued, and Melanie froze in amazement. "We don't need such a daughter-in-law, son," Simon's father muttered, as if Melanie were not in the room. "Look at her, Simon. How horribly she is dressed and combed. You deserve better. You need another girl. Don't worry, we'll find you the one you deserve," the mother added. Melanie couldn't believe this was possible. "Look, haven't you forgotten that I'm still here? And you, Simon? Why are you silent? After all, you're the one who brought me here, and now you're sitting there silently listening to bad things they say about me?" But the young man remained silent. He was afraid of being left without his parents' support now and in the future, so he could not cross them. Melanie stood up from the table and, with her head proudly raised, headed for the exit. She had nothing else to do here, and Simon, watching Melanie leave, suddenly thought that his parents were probably right, and this girl was no match for him. Melanie ran out into the street, ordered a cab, and sank tiredly on the bench waiting for the car. She had not anticipated such a reception, and she was especially struck by Simon's undignified behavior. At first, she expected that now the guy would run out after her, embrace her, and calm her down, but this did not happen, and Melanie realized that he was too afraid of his parents. Once in the cab, the girl could no longer hold back and wept bitterly. Meanwhile, There was a tense atmosphere hanging over Simon's house. The mother once again repeated that the girl was not suitable for him and that her son would meet a more worthy bride than this beggar. His father did not care much about his son's love affairs because he had many problems. There was a new owner in the factory where he had a high position, and in a couple of days he was to meet him. The man's thoughts were fully occupied with the question of how to make the new owner was pleased with him so that he would not be dismissed from his job. Unable to endure any more of his mother's lectures, Simon retired to his room, slamming the door loudly. But no matter how he felt about Melanie before, at heart he was very much like his parents and shared their views on life. Therefore, in the end, his cynical mind overcame his tender feelings for the girl. Melanie came home with her face swollen with tears. Her mother tried to find out what had happened, but the daughter just closed herself in her room. The girl took off the dress and threw it on the chair with hatred. She felt crushed and humiliated. Melanie had been looking forward to this event, preparing for it, and these people had trampled her and not even given her a word to say in her defense. It was especially painful for her to remember Simon's reaction, and she couldn't believe that a man could change so much in one moment. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Melanie did not want to answer her mother's questions now and thought about pretending to be asleep. But her mother had already noticed her daughter's condition and quietly entered the room. She hoped that the news she would break to her could cheer her up, and she was not mistaken. "Melanie, you left so quickly this morning that I didn't have time to tell you. Dad's coming tomorrow." "Great," the girl smiled cheerfully and even lifted her head from the pillow. "I'm so tired of you two living in different cities as strangers. I hope he stays longer this time." Seeing that Melanie was visibly cheerful, her mother left the room, and the girl anxiously and worriedly thought about her life. Because her father did not live with them, she had always been considered fatherless, and her childhood had not been easy. Even now, when she was grown up, it still affects the way other people treat her. Sighing, the girl hugged the pillow and fell asleep, rejoicing in her sleep at the impending meeting with her father. Gregory, Melanie's father, arrived the next day. He happily hugged his daughter and stayed late to have a cup of coffee with his beloved woman. Gregory often suggested that they move in with him, but Melanie's mother would not agree. She had grown up in the city. Everything here was familiar to her, and she could not imagine her life in another city. In addition, the climate here could not be more suitable for her weak lungs, and so they forced to live in different cities. And so today, Melanie's father, with a sly smile, informed them that since they were never going to move in with him, he could finally move in with them himself. Melanie fluttered her eyelashes in surprise, not understanding what her father was getting at. As it turned out, he had bought a controlling stake in the local factory and had been elected president of the board of directors. The man planned to get Melanie a job there, at first in the most basic position, so that she could understand all the intricacies of the business. He wanted to teach her everything he knew, and as soon as she was ready, promote her to management position. As her father was telling all this, Melanie's phone rang, and she saw that it was Simon. She said hello coldly, and when she heard from him that he decided to break up with her, the girl only smirked and just hung up. The next morning, getting up early, Melanie and her father drove to the factory. Melanie wore an elegant pantsuit, high-heeled shoes, and pinned her hair up exquisitely. Her father never stopped admiring his beautiful daughter. The first thing Gregory did was introduce his daughter to his new prodigy, the temporary executive director, Daniel. The young man had a brilliant education in one of the best universities in the country, had a degree in economics and business, and Gregory fully trusted him and promoted him in every way up the career ladder. Melanie immediately liked Daniel. She admired his intelligence and sense of tact. The next step was to get introduced to the management staff of the factory. All department heads and their deputies were gathered in the hall and eagerly waited the appearance of the new owner. When Daniel entered the hall, many people shrugged and began to whisper that such a young owner would hardly be able to manage such a large enterprise properly. Simon's father, on the contrary, was very pleased, for he believed that he could definitely come to an agreement with such an inexperienced owner and gain his trust. But Daniel introduced himself and called his position, and then Gregory and Melanie came in after him. The man introduced himself and the meeting began. Simon's father was shocked and rushed over after the meeting to speak with his son urgently. The man urged his son to apologize and invite Melanie to visit them again. Simon was displeased, but nevertheless gave in under pressure from his father and dialed Melanie's number. He listened to the cold ringing on the receiver for a long time, but nobody answered him. After 6 months of work at the factory, Melanie and Daniel became very close and started dating. And when they announced their wedding, Simon's family bitterly regretted that they had missed out on such a precious daughter-in-law.